Okay, welcome. This is the Carpenter DRA working group for Thursday, September 4th. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Sounds like this is going to be relatively quick. We don't have too much on our agenda, but yeah, Lima, did you want to get started?
Yeah, so I saw hold on, sorry, I'm trying to pull up my thing. I saw that link that we talked about last time where it was to work with the DRA clock driver.
Hmm.
So I was looking at it, it's just adding the dependency, but it's only for the scale testing for like cluster loader. So I was wondering if we want to get started. I can like start working on this with using that DRA clock driver in our unit tests. Like for example, like with the don't schedule DRA pod, like ignore it. I think instead of using a test pod, like we can use this like DRA clock driver setup. Is that kind of like the the mode that we're trying to go for, or we were trying to use this one specifically only for scale testing?
Well, so we have a couple different types of tests in the Carpenter projects. Like all the
Hmm.
tests you did in your PR were part of our like functional test suite. So there we're not actually running Quack. All of our nodes are just like node objects that are created by our test suite. Um,
Okay, that's like test node
yeah.
objects. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So our actual like end-to-end tests, which use Quack, those aren't necessarily scale tests, but they are us actually setting up a Kubernetes cluster,
Hmm.
installing Carpenter, installing Quack. And there's like a specialized Quack provider implementation. So, like in the same way we have an Azure provider and an AWS provider, there's also a Qwak provider that's actually implemented inside the upstream project. And
And that's because we don't want to actually like provision cloud provider stuff. It's like this is like Qwak is like kind of like a placeholder for the cloud provider, right?
yeah, so I mean, the idea was basically to lower the barrier of entry for testing, because I've not crunched the numbers on what like our what one single run of our AWS test suite actually costs, but I'm sure it's not super cheap.
Oh, I see.
So So yeah,
Okay.
this can run in just a standard K3s cluster that you're running on your local computer, install Carpenter onto it, and then run the ETE test that way. The distinction between the ETE tests and the functional tests is the functional tests are usually only testing like one or two controllers, whereas the ETE tests is a like fully built Carpenter controller, which is running against a real cluster. So like it's a full end-to-end test of the system. So an idea with this, I don't know if we'll use that same, I don't know if we can use the same like plugin that they're using for cluster loader with Qwak for DRA, but I think we want to have a similar idea of we want some controller or some mechanism that when a node registers with the cluster, we should be able to create a resource slice for that node. So basically playing the role of the DRA driver. So, and I think one of the reasons we might want to do our own thing that's like inspired or similar to what they did for Cluster Loader 2 is I imagine like we've talked about doing the node overlay integration. Like we want to
Hmm.
say um, any node overlays or any node claims which match this node overlay will have this resource slice associated. To ease configuration for testing, like in the happy path, I think you basically want to say like this controller should look at the node overlays, should read the resource slices, and then if a node which matches that node overlay is provisioned, we create the like corresponding resource slice.
Okay. Um, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense like on a higher level overview, but then in terms of like tangible first steps for this, like should I like would the first thing be hold on, just yeah, okay, I understand like the higher level understanding of how we want to use this and implement it on by ourselves. Like this uh DRA Quark driver and just like we basically just want to implement it, but not instead of for cluster loader, we want it for our own E2E test suite, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so then I I mean I'll look more into it, but that's gonna be mainly just setting that up in that um for our ED test suite.
Yeah, I think a first step for it, like we
Okay.
haven't ironed out the node overlay uh API.
Yeah.
So maybe rather than starting with that, because I think we also probably want a way to define it for outside of node overlays, like basically to be able to test, well, what if nodes are creating resource slices which aren't modeled by a node overlay? How does Carpenter handle it? So we'll want
Mhm.
that functionality. So the way I was thinking about it was we could have a config map um, where you define like a node selector and a resource slice. Pretty similar to the idea behind what we're doing with node overlay. But that way you can say like, well, even if there aren't any node overlays that are available, if there is a node that matches this node selector and yeah, if there's a node that matches the node selector, create the resource slice that is defined in this config map. So I think the nice thing about starting with that is we don't need to have any of the details for the actual Carpenter integration ironed out. It doesn't care about node claims. It doesn't care about node overlays. It just cares about Kubernetes nodes and creating the resource slice object.
Okay. Configure. Okay.
And strictly speaking, that would be enough for our E2E testing needs. Um, Anything else would really just be like kind of quality of life. So um, that alone though would be enough to unblock us from writing ET tests.
Okay. Okay, so this is all just like set up, I guess, in a way. Like I'm just wondering, I guess in my mind I was making sure that there wasn't like an actual test that needs to be written. But this is just gonna be like the setup for
Well,
our ED test.
I think there's a couple of different ways we could do it. So we could make it so that this is like a process in the test itself that is running in the background, handling like this resource slice creation and tearing it down. The other thing, which I actually think would be valuable for manual testing in Quack as well, is if we basically made this its own standalone controller that you can install in a cluster. So basically, the idea would be then for our E2E tests, rather than just installing Carpenter and Quack in this Quack cluster, we also install this Quack driver. And then it's running in the cluster, and it's not something we have to interact with in our test at all. It just kind of runs in the background and does its thing. And then the nice thing about that too is we can use it while doing manual testing with Quack, which I imagine most of the manual or most of the testing during development will probably be in Quack because some of these instances that you'd actually use DRA for are rather pricey.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So I think that answers a lot of what I wanted of my questions. I'll do like a work in progress PR and like kind of just explore these things out and then on that issue like any details could be ironed out on there. I feel like that sounds good, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you wanted to, like, maybe to start with that PR,
Yeah.
just write like a markdown file that goes in the designs folder and talk about basically like this is what this thing is, this is how you configure it, etc. We can iterate from there. And then I'm, of course, happy to talk about it in Slack as well.
Okay, yeah, just like how that other one did it, right? Like the README file for the DRA clock driver dependency for scale testing.
Maybe I haven't taken a look at that.
Oh, okay, okay.
I haven't taken a look at what docs they did. So in the Carpenter repo, at least, we have a folder, designs, which just has a bunch of markdown files, which pretty much whenever you do an RFC, that's where that goes. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, I would treat this kind of like an RFC, but more so just it's not a Carpenter feature per se, because it's not like part of the Carpenter binary, but it is like part of our testing infrastructure.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Yeah. And then if I have any other questions, I'll definitely just Slack you.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I won't be
Um,
available tomorrow, but should be all next week.
okay, great. Yeah. Also, I know we have a chat with us two and Jack. Garvin, if you wanna, if you're planning on starting to do more work, do you want me to like add you to that? I feel like this is just where we talk about like actual implementation. Like, for example, my first PR, like I was asking all my questions in there. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's something that would interest you.
yeah, that'll be helpful. I'll try to dedicate some time. I don't know how much time I can do it, but yeah, I'd love to
Okay,
try
I
and help.
just didn't want to like overload you with like Slack notifications,
No, it's
especially if
fine.
it's not related to you. Okay.
Yeah, and then I guess as far as other things go, so talked about last week kind of working out um what we could reuse from upstream, what we need to re-implement ourselves. Unfortunately, I think I have came to the conclusion that we can reuse some of the util functions from the allocator, but we can't reuse the allocator itself. Um, so I've been
Yeah.
working I haven't had a ton of time to work on it this past week, so I haven't made a ton of progress since we last discussed, but I am working on figuring out what that allocation algorithm looks like. I think from there, I should be able to kind of write out the architectural requirements, and then we can start codifying those in the RFC. I'm hoping over the next couple of weeks, I should be able to be a little more heads down working on this, so we can actually get the RFC out. Um, but yeah, a lot of time's been taken up doing some review for some other large PRs, so I haven't been able to spend quite as much time as I would like on this. But those are wrapping out, so I'm
That's
hoping,
completely fair. Yeah.
yeah, hoping that I would like to see us have an RFC published at the very least by the end of September, which
Yeah.
I think is realistic. And I think the goal of the RFC too is going to be to try and have the architecture, like both this CX and the architecture pretty well worked out. That way we can also start divvying up tasks a little bit better. Um, right now, at least I don't have a codified enough view of what the architecture looks like to start trying to make subtasks out of it.
Hmm.
But that's where I think this testing task is good because it is pretty well independent of the actual Carpenter implementation.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
yeah, unfortunately, the one thing I am kind of struggling with, and I don't know how much more time I'm going to try and burn um, working through it, is to be totally correct from a carpenter standpoint. You pretty much need to like walk the entire list of combinations of device allocations. Um, this is similar to what the allocation algorithm upstream does, uh, but they get to short circuit as soon as they find one valid one. For us to know like as many possible different like domains that are compatible, um, we need to walk through all of them. So I am trying to think through basically some optimizations we can do on that. But worst case, for the initial revision, I think we might be looking at DRA not scaling particularly well with a ton of devices. Like if you have resource claims which list 10 devices, it might not scale particularly well, but those are things we should be able to make optimizations for in the future. And I don't know if that's too common of a use case anyway, at least initially. I think generally I expect most resource claims to be 1 or 2 devices.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think unless you had
Okay.
anything else to discuss, I think we can probably end early.
Yeah, that was all for me.
Okay, cool. Thanks to you both for coming.
Thanks.
Same time next week, I think.
Hmm.
All right, see ya.
Okay. See y'all. Thank you so much.
Mhm.